In a letter just released from pro-Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil, the detained U.S. green card holder says he is a, quote, political prisoner. The letter comes after an overnight court filing in New York shed new light on his hasty detention. Another Columbia student tells CBS's Lilia Luciano why she fled to Canada after her student visa was revoked.
Turn around. Okay, let's not. Okay, he's not resisting.
As he was being arrested by ICE agents, former Columbia University student Mahmoud Khalil said he was filled with confusion. In a new court filing, Khalil, a legal U.S. permanent resident, countered the government's claims that he was flown to a detention center in Louisiana due to a bedbug infestation in a nearby New Jersey facility. I did not hear anyone mention bedbugs, he said in a statement. He also feared deportation when agents told him they were going to JFK Airport.
The events in the last 2 weeks have sort of spiraled out of control.
Columbia doctoral student Ranjani Srinivasan fled to Canada after her student visa was revoked.
What was your biggest fear?
That I would be detained indefinitely.
Without a visa, her enrollment was terminated. The issue seemed to stem from last year's pro-Palestinian protest at Columbia University. On April 30th, students occupied Hamilton Hall on campus. That night, NYPD officers arrested hundreds at various universities, including Srinivasan, but she says she was not involved.
You were not inside Hamilton Hall?
No, I was at a department picnic with my friends and faculty.
You weren't even protesting that day?
No, I was on the way back home. Saw barricades and police. I think the police charged at us.
She was cited for obstructing the sidewalk and failure to disperse. Both of her charges were dismissed, but according to DHS sources, she did not include those citations in her visa renewal application. In a statement, DHS accused her of being involved in activities supporting Hamas without sharing any proof.
Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem said that you are a terrorist sympathizer.
I just found it absurd. I'm not a terrorist sympathizer.
For now, she's stuck in limbo and hopes to clear her name, return to the U.S., and finish her degree. Lilia Luciano, CBS News, New York.
The Trump administration also wants to deport the Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil, who led anti-war demonstrations at Columbia University.
Khalil is a legal resident. He was arrested in New York last week and appeared today in an immigration court in Louisiana as he fights to stay in the country.
CBS News talked with his pregnant wife. Here's Elaine Quijano.
This video shows ICE agents arresting Mahmoud Khalil a few weeks ago. He was one of the leaders of protest last year at Columbia University, demanding a ceasefire in Gaza.
You guys really don't need to be doing all of that.
Khalil, a legal resident with no criminal record, is being held in a detention facility in Louisiana, where he's fighting deportation.
My husband was taken away from me in the middle of the night. It was one of the most terrifying times of my life.
His wife, Noor Abdallah, shot the video of her husband's arrest. She spoke to Aaron Moriarty for CBS Sunday Morning.
I understand him not wanting to take those precautions.
What do you mean precautions?
Wearing a mask and just trying not to be so visible. Because for him, that's such an important piece, and standing up for the rights of his people is so, so important. And so I do understand why he made the decision that he made,
Do you think, though, that made him a target?
I think it definitely did.
Abdallah also said at first she thought her husband's arrest was a misunderstanding and that he'd be home in a few hours. He remains in detention in Louisiana. His next hearing is April 8th.
The latest targets of President Trump's government cutbacks include Radio Free Asia. Its stated mission is to provide fair, objective, accurate, and uncensored news and information to Asian nations where there are few, if any, free speech protections.
Today was the last day on the job for hundreds of RFA employees, and Margaret Brennan reports some of them fear they could be deported.
After the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre, Congress created Radio Free Asia to broadcast facts into countries where governments are afraid of them. RFA President Bei Fang.
The U.S. saw China gunning down its own citizens and then also successfully covering it up afterwards. The U.S. Congress created us with an eye to giving these people in China and other authoritarian countries around Asia the ability to have free press.
So bringing free speech to places where free speech is prohibited.
Exactly.
Fang put 75% of the staff on leave. We saw journalists saying their goodbyes in the newsroom. It's a result of the funding cuts ordered by the U.S. Agency for Global Media's Carrie Lake.
Costing you, the taxpayer, a fortune.
At least 8 RFA journalists could be forced to leave the U.S. if they lose their work visas. Vietnamese journalist Qua Lai is one of them.
Do you think you will be deported?
I believe so, but I hope not. I believe that if I go back, then the government will snatch me right away.
5 who worked for RFA are already behind bars overseas. RFA funds their families and their defense.
These are not U.S. citizens, but they are people who are in jail because they worked for a U.S.-funded network.
So a decision like this has a blast radius that impacts a lot of people.
Yep.
If you need Congress to continue with these grants, how do you convince them you're worth saving?
We're worth saving because we actually bring benefit to the U.S. taxpayer. I think it is in the U.S. national security interest. We are actually one of the lowest cost-effective elements of soft power that they could have.
Soft power meaning influence without military force.
Exactly.
And Margaret Brennan joins us now. So, Margaret, what would replace RFA? Have they got a plan?
You know, Maurice, I have asked people in the Trump administration and in Congress that question, and no one has offered or explained any plans to refurbish or replace RFA, just to dismantle it. Now, in the meantime, RFA tells us that unless the courts or Congress or a private financier steps in, they only have enough money to continue broadcasting for about another month. They've actually already started to dim their radio transmitters that broadcast into closed countries like North Korea and China.
Margaret, these journalists who worked for an American-funded entity that are in danger, is there anything that the U.S. can do to try to help them, or anybody else try to help them?
Well, Radio Free Asia does plan to go to court to try to force the Trump administration to release the funds so they can get these journalists back to work. You know, the journalist we introduced you to there said he came to this country so he could freely report back to his home nation. And, you know, one of the things that we did was go to the State Department and say, what's going to happen with the visas for these at-risk journalists? And we were told they can try to apply for asylum while they remain on U.S. soil. There's no plan.
We have an update now on a story we've been following closely: the deportation of hundreds of Venezuelan migrants to El Salvador without due process.
The Trump administration insists they are criminals and gang members, but as we've reported, there is reason to believe some are not.
Lily Luciano talked to another wife who insists her husband is no criminal and no gang member. And then Lilia spoke to the president's border czar.
By now, you've seen the videos from El Salvador. More than 200 Venezuelan men deported from the U.S. and dropped into one of the world's most dangerous prisons, known as CECOT.
¿Tú lo reconociste? Sí. You recognized him?
One of the faces in the crowd is Nice's partner, she says.
How did you feel when you saw the prison?
Mucho temor, miedo.
It was terrifying to see the videos.
She's 9 months pregnant, past her due date.
Él no va a estar presente.
He's not going to be there when his child is born.
Her partner is Henry Albornoz. The 29-year-old crossed the southern border more than a year ago. She says he's been working as a mechanic in Texas and was detained in January during a routine check-in with federal agents. According to his attorney, Albornoz has no criminal record here or in Venezuela.
He has never been a gang member.
No, nunca tuvo involucraciones en eso.
He was never involved in any criminal activity.
No, una persona muy trabajadora, muy pendiente de la familia,
He's a
muy
good
responsable,
man,
primero su hogar ante todas las cosas.
His family first, above all things, hardworking.
The Trump administration says the men deported were all members of a criminal gang called Tren de Aragua, known as TDA. But we reported last week on a similar case where a Venezuelan migrant with no known criminal record also landed in the CECOT prison.
We came to the White House to talk to the border czar, Tom Homan, to better understand why the government says that these men are all terrorists.
I've been told by the highest levels of ICE, the men and women of ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, who built that manifest, who went to each of these files, spent hundreds and hundreds of hours investigating each and every one of these people, that they are in fact, every one of them, a member of TDA.
How do you know they are all members? Have you seen that evidence?
I have not drilled down every file. Again, I'm trusting the men and women who do this for a living.
Is it possible that the administration made a mistake by sending 238 men saying that they are TDA members, assuring that they're all TDA members without us seeing
I'm not
what the
worrying
evidence
mistakes
is?
at all, but I can tell you this, not every gang member has a criminal record.
And Lilia Luciano joins us now from Washington. Lilia, we've been wondering from the very beginning here, for those with no criminal record, what's their recourse? How do they get out of this situation?
Maurice, that is a great question. I have asked the government of El Salvador, and they said, you have to ask the U.S. government. That is why I wanted to sit with Tom Homan. He referred me to the courts, said that's going to be figured out in courts. I asked, can they be brought back to get that due process? He said it's up to the DOJ, but the Department of Justice is refusing to answer any questions about the deportees to the very courts.